What is separation? Separation is the action or state of moving or being moved apart. What is required for something to be separate? So, from my understanding, if separation is the action or state of moving or being moved apart, doesn't that mean that it was once whole? If it's being separated, it was once together, correct? So, what I'm basically getting into in this episode is the illusion of separation. What is the illusion of separation? What is separation? Why do I believe separation is an illusion? What changes if separation were an illusion? And what's required to remove the illusion? Can it be removed? We will discuss. So this series will just be me asking myself a few questions and answering them. The first question, of course, what is separation by definition? We discussed that. What is required for something to be separate? We discussed that. What is required for something to be separate is that it started as a whole, or it started together. What are examples of separation in daily life? If I can think, off the top of my head, the first thing I think of, we have race, religion, class, gender, politics, opinions, just state lines, borders, countries, anything, colors, like all of that is separation. It's identified individually by its own thing, right? So the next question is, what is my perspective on separation? My perspective on separation. If something gets separate, it was once whole. And all of the, things that I mentioned that are separate, started off together. And what makes me, intrigued with the topic of separation is usually separation causes conflict, and separation causes, disconnect. And disconnect can lead to misunderstanding. It can lead to, malice. It can lead to ignorance. It can lead to many other things that, cause many other things and many other things. And I've always wondered, I've always been the person who loved everybody, wanted to get to know everybody, wanted to try everything, just wanted to be immersed in every piece of life we have on this earth. I just thought everything was beautiful, and everything, is connected in some type of way. We're all here together. Everything is here together. But I began to see that in this world, that is not how everybody receives things. So it made me begin to question, like, okay, we have all these things that are separating us, but what if we're not really separate? Because, again, for something to be separate, it had to be whole. What, is causing this separation? Why is separation so prominent? What are we doing to resolve the separation? Do we want to resolve the separation, right? And in some instances, we don't want to resolve the separation because certain things benefit off the separation. And truly, to resolve the separation, we have to come to an agreement that we were once whole. And in terms of certain things that I mentioned, race, religion, politics, everything of that sort, that means everybody has to agree on one thing. And with that being said, I think that is currently a challenge, because we are sitting where, we fight over agency. We fight over, control and we fight over like hierarchy. No, if I'm right, then I'm better than this person, or I have a one up on this person. But it takes a lot of control. It takes a lot of releasing narratives that we have, because if we were to remove some of the separation, some of these narratives wouldn't exist. And a lot of people benefit off of certain narratives, can't see themselves associating with certain things. And in that case, it makes sense why there is separation, but it's all in the hands of us. It's not something that can't be undone. It's something that's going to take work, and it's going to take thought. It's going to take softening of people's hearts and changing your mindset. It's going to take accountability. It's going to take change of perspective. It's going to take rewriting stories. And in a sense, I began to question if that would actually be the correct choice to make. And we'll get into that further. So, my next question is, where things get real. What changes if separation were an illusion? And I kind of just spoke on that. But what changes if separation was an illusion would mean that everything is whole. When it comes to everyday life, things would not be identifiable. You wouldn't be able to identify red from blue if they're whole, if they're the same thing. But the beauty of contrast allow you to see red as blue and blue as different colors, black and white as different skin colors. And with that being said, it brings into the idea of experience. If there were no separation, there would be nothing to experience, because if everything were whole, you wouldn't have anything to compare it to. Comparison allows experience. Comparison is contrast. Without this, there is no experience. If we didn't have light originating from white and expressing through the prism as the rainbow, we would not experience day-to-day life how we see now. We would only see white light if it was not separated. So, separation is not the issue. Separation actually allows identity. Separation allows experience. Separation allows opinions. Separation is what allows you to be human. The issue, if people deem it as an issue, comes into where we don't realize separation is a tool to benefit us, to collect as much information in this melting pot and bring it together and create something bigger than us. With separation, you get to have different archetypes of people, different experiences, different things that one could not just experience on its own. Separation. You have people who live in the mountains. You have people who live in different countries. You have people who speak different languages. And with that being said, you have a multitude of possibilities on what can be discovered. Now, if we were to take this and benefit off of it, we would excel as a whole, as a community. But we get confused because we take separation as a rule and not a tool. Separation is not a rule. People take separation and say, okay, I'm this, that's that. I am not allowed to even think about the other. It's not even that I'm allowed. I don't care to. This is me. This is who I am. This is what I think. This is what I hear, see, experience. These are what I receive through my 5 senses. And this is what it is. There's nothing beyond this. And if you think so, you're wrong. Right? And that's how most of the world operates, right? And, to understand this, I think you would have to step back out of those constraints. And when I say constraints, I believe your race is a constraint, your religion is a constraint, your environment is a constraint, and other things that just define who you are and your identity. Not in a bad way. They're just limiting, because these things are, attached to an identity, telling you who you are, what's right, and things of that sort. But once you start to soften those boundaries, those limits, and allow yourself to understand that things are beyond just what you experience, you start to question, you start to see things as a whole. And because you see things as a whole, you take your experience, you optimize your experience more so that it can benefit the whole. So what changes if separation were an illusion? Nothing. Because, in my opinion, separation is an illusion. It's just, in what way are we using separation? Are we using it as a rule or a tool? So it's not what changes if it were an illusion. It is what changes if we were to use separation differently as a community, as a whole. The next question is, why do we choose to experience separation? Again, like I stated, if things weren't separate, there would be nothing to experience. If there were no separate race, we wouldn't even know what race was. Because without the separation, you don't have contrast. You have nothing to compare it to. So if we were all the same race, we wouldn't even think about race, because it wouldn't be something to be classified. It's one. If there were no separation, there would be no colors, no contrast, nothing to even compare. You wouldn't know that there were colors, and so on and so forth. Correct? So we chose separation, and we chose to experience separation so that we can have an experience, so that we can come here and enjoy life, learn new things, pick up on new information. Right? We chose to experience separation because at the core, we are not really separated. We know at all times, even if it's not consciously, we know at all times what it feels like to be whole. We've all experienced being whole. But because being whole is not something that you can directly experience because it doesn't have a contrast, we chose separation so we can experience. Now, my last question, and of course, this is something that can be talked about forever. It can go into different ways. It can go into different avenues. We can apply it to different systems. It's just a way of life, a very broad thing that we can talk about for days. But I have one more question to finish off this podcast, and maybe, I'll talk about it more in the future. Who knows? But the last question for today is, what's required to remove the illusion? Can it be removed? And of course, this is all my opinion. What's required to remove the illusion? I don't truly believe that separation is an illusion. I believe that it being, how do I say this? I believe that separation being a, one way, this can't be changed, a rigid idea, I believe that's incorrect. I believe we shouldn't remove the idea of separation. Without separation, again, there's no experience. But I do believe that it can be redefined and it can be used as a tool to understand that separation brings us closer. Separation, again, like we stated, the definition of separation is the action or state of moving or being moved apart. So with that being said, you were originally all together. And with that being said, it brings together some sort of unity. So it's not necessarily removing the idea of separation. It's more of removing the rigidity, associated with separation. It's removing limits. It's understanding that you are experiencing a piece of a whole. You are experiencing a extreme, white or black, hot, cold, happy, sad. You're experiencing an extreme, but that does not make you separate from the other extreme. You're just on a different gradient. With that being said, you are experiencing something totally different than what you're compared to, of course, and that's the beauty of it. If we were all the same, experiencing the same things, this will not be beautiful. We're all different, experiencing different things to add to a whole, to add to each other, to grow each other. So it's not really about removing separation. It's about capitalizing on separation. It's about using it as a tool. It's about understanding. It's about observing. It's about listening. It's about integration. It's about learning about other people, learning about nature, learning about culture, trying new things, learning languages, letting go of rigid structure. It's about being unbound. It's about being free. It's about being able to experience without being stuck. Certain things are unchangeable, but you are not limited. We are not limited at all. Anything can be experienced. The body we have right now, there are certain things that are a structure, and in this current moment that we're in this current, sector, these are like this in this sector. These variables are unchangeable. Your race, where you were born, certain things are unchangeable variables in this instance, but that does not mean the whole equation cannot have a different output. There are changeable variables. There are things within us that are unlimited. And with that unlimited contribution, you can have any output. So with that being said, it's not about removing the illusion again of separation. It's about learning how to work with it and capitalize off of this idea. It's about really seeing, okay, you put me in this box. How many places can I take this box? How many things can I put into this box? How many things can I, take out of this box? How many people can experience this box, right? It's just a different abstract idea. It's very, right now I'm high level, but when you begin to think about it, when you begin to understand that this is a tool, you are no different than thy neighbor. You cannot judge. You are you. Of course you're you. If you weren't you, you wouldn't be able to experience. And when you understand that, the experience becomes totally better. You begin to understand. You begin to be able to create. You begin to have more possibility. You become less rigid. I think that's the whole point of this life, is to let go of rigidity. We are unbound in a sense, but bound by certain, variables like our human body. So, learning how to become an architect within this, box, learning how to work outside the box, learning how to think outside the box, learning how to create outside the box, learning to just be. And I think that is the beauty of separation. In the beginning, maybe I thought separation wasn't an issue. Separation is not an issue. It is how it can be perceived, and it's how it is used majority of the time. So separation is a tool. It is not a rule. Thank you all for listening. If you listened this far, you were definitely interested. I would say this is a very interesting topic, right? And it's something that, you can begin to ask yourself questions. Ask yourself questions about what you believe is separate, what you believe, is not a part of you. This is the last thing. I don't know why this is the very last thing I would say, but if everything is made up of atoms, every single thing, like they say in science, and atoms are protons, neutrons, and electrons, no matter what it is. So me, my headphones, my lamp, you, your brother, your sister, your mom, the tree, if we're all made up of the same atoms, what is different? Of course, presentation, perspective. But on a deeper level, what is different? Food for thought. Thank you all. I am gone for now. Bye.